Pastime, we offer GPS solutions that connect vehicles and protect assets. Our technology allows you to locate a vehicle with pinpoint accuracy. And with our data analytics, dealers and finance companies can make better decisions and reduce risk. The result? Fewer defaults, fewer delinquencies, easier, lower cost recovery, and increased value for your portfolio, and improved customer communication. Visit us at pastimegps.com to learn more.
Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you at this virtual convention, albeit we're meeting under different circumstances than any of us expected, and we're not in Las Vegas. But we had the opportunity to address this, and that's what this workshop is about, is how has COVID-19, which has also impacted our ability to attend this convention, how has it impacted customer and client engagement, particularly in the dealership world? First of all, COVID-19 has presented never-before-seen challenges, and it's forced virtually every business to reinvent the way they communicate. And this has been on a macro level across almost every industry. So there's no question it's impacted the auto industry. We here at TextMaxx Pro have seen it impact other industries that we work with, professional services, HOA associations, health clubs. Virtually every business has been impacted in some form or fashion by COVID-19. And this has had, in our opinion, and because I come from an automotive background, this has had particular impact on the auto industry. And it's really from multiple angles. It's impacted the sales process, it's impacted the service process, and it's also impacted the finance and collections process for those of you in buy here, pay here. So today we want to talk to you and kind of give you some insight and some data from things that we've learned over the last 4 to 6 months as all of us have dealt with COVID-19. And we want to help you hopefully have some resources by the end of this workshop to think about your communication strategy, how you interact with your customers and your clients, and how can you adapt and continue being resilient in this new world. So there's no question, in our opinion, we believe that there's been a long-lasting paradigm change that will stick. So we don't believe this is just a one-off event. I think some things will get back to a sense of normalcy, but I believe that all of us have learned varying things based on the way COVID has impacted our business. And I think dealers will be particularly long-lasting in some of the changes that have been virtually pushed upon us by this unprecedented, once-in-a-generation, once-in-a-lifetime type incident. So to illustrate this change, I want to share some why with you, some facts that will help you understand why this paradigm shift has occurred. So did you know that 98% of text messages are read in the first 3 minutes? Think about that. And this data is available from several outlets nationally. This is not our data, but you can find this anywhere on the web. Virtually 98% of all text messages are read in the first 3 minutes. And think about yourself for a minute. Practically speaking, when your phone dings and you get that text message, what do? Quite often you read it. And it's an amazing, powerful way to communicate because you can get somebody's eyeballs, you can get attention, albeit for 20 seconds or 30 seconds, but you have a very high percentage rate that you're going to contact them and be able to interact with them. That is versus 14% of email messages are typically read. So think about that. If you send out 1,000 email messages with a message, 14% or 140 people of those 1,000 are going to actually read your message. The other 86% are not going to catch it. Versus text messaging at 98%, 980 out of those 1,000 messages you send are going to be read in 3 minutes. So it makes it an incredibly powerful way to communicate because you have a high probability of reaching your audience, whether that's a sales customer, whether it's your service customers, or whether it's a buy here, pay here auto account and you're trying to collect and work through a loan collection process. 97% of Americans read at least one text per day. The rates for opt-in on marketing campaigns is 93%, and it's proven that 70% of Americans prove to receive discounts, offers, notifications via SMS. So when you roll all of that together, that's really what makes this a powerful way to communicate. Now, how does that connect to COVID-19? I want to share this slide with you. This is actually our TextMaxx Pro data. So this is resident in our network. And this is what we observed as the impact of COVID on business communication really from March of this year. And I want to walk you through this because there was a dramatic lift, which we weren't quite sure. We were just like every other business. We weren't sure how COVID was going to impact what we do. We help dealers and other businesses facilitate communication via text messages. So COVID affected us all, and we asked ourselves, how are we likely to be impacted? We were optimistic because we know it's a powerful communication channel, but we were still blown away when we saw the way the platform is harnessed. And this is what dealers did during the last 6 months. If you look at the very first blue column on your far left, you'll see in March of this year, many dealers, that was when COVID started hitting. That's when some states started putting restrictions in. We saw a bump. There were 42,000 U.S. cases back then. Now I think there's over 600,000 or 700,000. We saw a lot of activity from March, and as we moved into April, and those 31 states, the first ones put shelter-in-place orders, the lift was 47% over the previous month. So we saw, and this is the pure number of texts going out on our platform that dealers are sending. 47% is a big jump. We had never seen that before in the history of our company. So we were amazed at first. And it was interesting as we looked at the messages, there were dealers, and those states had different versions of what the restrictions were, right? So some dealers were saying, we're closed until further notice. Some dealers were saying, our service drive is open, but not our sales outlet. Some dealers were saying, we're doing sales, we're open for sales, we want to help you find a car, but we can only do it by appointment only in our showroom. So it doesn't matter what that message was. The powerful impact was dealers were using it to get the message out fast. So think about you have 10,000 people in your CRM or active in your BDC department or potential prospects. How long would it take you to call 10,000 service customers to let them know service drive's open? It would take an enormous amount of time. How long would it take you to send a text message to 10,000 people saying, hey, our service department's open, we're sensitive to COVID, we're social distancing, we can still help service your car? You can do that in literally less than 2 minutes. And 98% of those 10,000 people are going to read your message. So I think that's what made this, that's what drove this chart that you're looking at. And then in May, the center column on this chart, we saw states starting to ease. I think a lot of us got optimistic that, it's behind us, the worst is over. And we actually saw text messaging go back down to what we would call our normal monthly levels. The millions of texts that were going out actually went to a level that we deem normal and in the normal course of business. And then in June, we had that kind of second wave. The U.S. started seeing a 59% increase in terms of the cases that were there. And dealers again went up another 50% in volume, in text messaging volume to reach their customer. We instantly saw it start to rebound in June. And this happened literally in the first week of June, which is when some states started opening back up. Some of those messages were, hey, we're back open. We'd love to see you again. Hey, we have inventory on the ground. There was a lot of different messaging, but the way the dealers were communicating was via SMS to their customers' telephones. And then in July, we also saw a lift from the June levels. We've seen this continue through the summer as there's been an emphasis on social distancing, masks being required for certain dealerships. We've seen those messages go out. Please wear a mask when you come to visit our facility. But the bottom line is, rather than try to call customers, email customers, dealers have harnessed, as many other businesses have, dealers have harnessed this text messaging as a way to get the word out to their consumers. Now, when you wrap all this up, I kind of showed you what happened March through July there. And we didn't have time to assemble the August data in time for this convention, but if anybody's interested in discussing the continued trend, we'd be happy to share those numbers with you. In terms of looking at the same period last year, which is also very telling, this particular slide has, these are again are our internal numbers. These are TextMaxx Pro numbers. Our 2020 usage versus 2019 usage, and this is just purely number of text messages sent. March was up 55% over the previous year. April was up 160%. You saw that on the previous chart when we had the big spike. May was up 65% over previous May, and June was up 86% over last year. So from my perspective, when we looked at these, we said, wow. And that was when we reached out with NIADA when we were learning about the convention, and we thought this would be a great topic to share with dealers because there's no question COVID impacted the way you communicate. It's impacted everything you do, the way you buy cars, the way you sell, the way you close deals, but this also impacted simply the way you communicate on just a basic level. So, what does all this tell you and how do you react? Why did this happen? Why did this great increase of 100% roughly, double what we saw previously, happen due to COVID? I would tell you it's definitely impacted by COVID because we see the messages and we know what dealers are trying to do. I think the reasons are, one, SMS, MMS. So SMS is pure texting, MMS is sending an image, multi-method service. SMS is extremely efficient. It's the least laborious mode of connecting. So in terms of the example I used, how long would it take you to make 1,000 phone calls versus how long does it take you to send 1,000 texts? No comparison, right? And I think that's one reason why. It's the least laborious mode, doesn't require a lot of labor. You don't have to pay people to be on the phone. You simply load up a text on a platform, hit the send button, and your consumers and your customers are communicated with. One, I think a lot of dealers that we saw, I think, were surprised by the response and the engagement, and that continued to drive increased adoption and usage. We know we also have the opportunity to serve NIADA as a member benefit partner. We're proud of that. We saw NIADA adapt and try to help dealers understand how to get PPP loans. They were mentioning webinars that would give dealers insight into how to maintain business right now. And again, it was a very effective way to reach thousands of dealers quickly because 98% of the dealers probably looked at their phone and got the message. So the engagement of the customer is very, very high, which is almost one of the holy grails of marketing or communication, right? Is the higher the percentage in terms of my reach, the better the mode of communication. The other thing is, and this is, I'm going to share some global data with you. SMS is actually a preferred mode of communication across various age demographics. So we've heard some people say, well, texting is only for the young people or the next generation. It's not quite true. And I want to share, this is some national data. It comes from a global contact center benchmarking report on SMS texting. So it's sourced there at the bottom. You can find this out on the web. So they found that when they surveyed different age demographics, and if you look at the far right or the far left grouping of bars, that's the 25 to 34-year-old preference. The next section over is the 35 to 44-year-old presence. And then there's 45 to 54, and then there's 55 and over. And if you look, here's the various messaging, telephone, face-to-face, other, mail. And across every demographic, their studies showed that no matter what age bracket, messaging was a preferred mode of communication. And again, it's easy. It's a simple way to connect with somebody and has a very high probability of A, getting the message across, and B, it also allows the recipient to interact with you. So for instance, one of the best ways to use SMS texting, in my opinion, is in the service department. How often do your service advisors try to call a customer and say, Mr. Leedom, we looked at your car, your brakes need repaired, the cost is going to be $199. Please call me back. Well, that service advisor is out trying to do that all day long. That's their job. Now I call back when I get out of a meeting because I couldn't react at that time. I call the service advisor back, and he's on a line with somebody else, or he's in the service drive, and now I leave a message for him. A lot of labor going on, a lot of unnecessary activity there. The nice thing about texting is he can send me that text and say, Mr. Leedom, your car needs the brakes. It's $199. Please respond okay to approve. I'm sitting in a meeting or at a luncheon. I see it. I type okay. My repair happens very efficiently. We've both helped each other out in terms of being more efficient. So I think that's one of the reasons that you look at this, you see that messaging and telephone are the two highest preferred modes of communication. And I would tell you, there's only going to be more adoption. I have a 30-year-old daughter who jokes that she has 180 voicemails on her cell phone that she'll never listen to, but if you send her a text, she'll respond in less than a minute. That's typical of particularly the 25 to 34-year-olds in this chart, as well as the 35 to 44-year-olds. So if you don't have a strategy where you're harnessing this power of communication, you're probably missing out on some efficiency, some sales, some service opportunity, and overall more profitability for your dealership. So I hope that helps you in terms of understanding the appetite for texting. We want to give you some ideas today of we've talked about the power of this communication, how COVID has driven it up in terms of a way to communicate with people. I want to give you some examples of how you can harness that for your dealership so that you have some concrete solutions that you can go back and think about and see if they fit your dealership. And there's 6 different items on here. I'm going to try to give you some different examples, but let's start over here with marketing messages. So marketing messages via text, as you build, some of you that have been in business 10, 20, 30, 50 years have thousands of people in your database. You have thousands of customers that have done business with you. I recently talked to a dealer that said, I have 55,000 customers in my community that have done business with us over the years. So imagine that dealer's having a weekend sale and wants to get the word out. A marketing message via text messaging campaign is a great way to push out a bulk message to everybody that accepts text messages from his particular business. Another option for those of you that have service departments, it's a great way when the service drive is slow for a week or a day or a period, is to push messages out saying, hey, we're running oil change and tire rotation specials, or we have a special, this is a $20 coupon for the service department. So it's a very efficient way that you can market to your customers. And again, think about that penetration rate. 98% of them are going to read your message. You're going to have their eyeballs for 20 to 30 seconds, maybe more. So a very powerful way for you to market your business, be it sales or service. Now let's talk about two-way sales conversion. So it's another way that you are able to do in being total control of the conversation from the time a customer may text you based on being on your website all the way through to you're approved, we have your paperwork ready, come on in, all the way to congratulations, we hope you're enjoying your new vehicle. I recently had a neighbor, a good friend of mine, Jay Henderson, was buying a car for his daughter over the weekend, and they're reluctant to go into a lot of dealerships because of trying to limit exposure in different environments due to COVID. And while they were in one dealership looking at a car, a Nissan Murano that they liked, they were almost ready to close, and they had been texting with 10 or 12 different dealerships at the same time. A salesman, a very savvy salesman from one other dealership said, well, are you going to get an extended warranty with it? Because I don't think they'll offer you one there. He went out on a limb. They were not offering a warranty, anything beyond an as-is unit, the dealership he was sitting at. And as a result, they left that dealership and went and bought from the other one solely because he had been communicating with various stores via SMS. So while he's sitting there, there's a two-way negotiation going on, if you think about it, where a salesman in some other store is negotiating against you right while the customer's sitting in your showroom. You want to be on the other end of that, not the receiving end. So that's a powerful way for you to keep in touch with your customer, let them know you're there to serve them, let them know you're thinking about them, and you're trying to close a sales opportunity. Service appointment reminders are excellent opportunities. You can actually, on many text platforms, you can load these up automatically. So I'm not talking about a service advisor that has to sit there and text every customer. These can be loaded up at an interval where if you have my cell phone number in your service platform, I can get a text every 90 days, every 120 days. You can look at my mileage, typically what I average, and if I don't drive my car as much, perhaps it's a once-a-year text. But the bottom line is it's a great way for you to text me, hey, this is Leedom Service Department. We believe it's time to service your vehicle. Click here to call us or to schedule an appointment. Very efficient way to market and remind people about service. Other opportunities are customer surveys. You can send out bit.ly links or survey links within a text. How did we do? We were happy to sell you your car. We hope we served you well. Please complete this 3-minute survey. Great way to collect customer feedback. Enhanced communications, it really gives you a lot of opportunity where it acts as a CRM platform, really, because you now have a documented script of every communication you have via text with customers, because most platforms will warehouse and store those for you for at least 5 years. So now if you have an allegation against a salesperson and they say this person kept texting me and I'm upset about it, if they're using their personal device, you can't control that, which we'll talk about compliance in a little bit. If they're using a platform that your dealership uses, you can go back and look at that, and you can either verify that allegation or you can look at it and say, no, it didn't happen. We apologize, but it simply didn't happen. So it really enhances the communication, and you have a documented path, and that works two ways. Bottom line is you have to be compliant, which we'll talk about. And then finally, it's used for loyalty programs and points, whether it's service department drive or other outlets like that. A lot of restaurants are starting to use SMS loyalty programs. We've seen it in health clubs and others. So you can develop a plan for your dealership based on service department expenditure. Every $500 spent, receive a $25 coupon. Lots of things you could do with that. So I hope that gives you a few examples of some ways to use texting. We're going to have some time at the end for some questions and answers, and if any of you have questions on items related to that, we'll be able to help facilitate that. Now, I mentioned compliance, and it would just not be an automotive convention if we didn't have to address compliance, would it? Everything has a compliance angle. Texting has a significant compliance angle. And it's very critical, and if there's only one part you take away from this today, yeah, I get texting, I know I can communicate that way. I want you to really hear this compliance angle, because many dealers are surprised by this, and the dealers that I've had a chance to work with that end up on the other end of it are not happy campers when the rifle is pointed at you and you're in a TCPA lawyer's sights and they're trying to get a settlement out of you. So let's talk a little bit about that. SMS MMS business usage is governed by what's called the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or it's often referred to as the TCPA. So if you want to do an experiment, go onto Google, type in TCPA lawyers, and you will get pages of lawyers that will tell you how they can get settlements for you because somebody violated the TCPA. Over the last 2 years, the top 5 TCPA settlements have been by companies that are big names. I'm not going to mention them here, but they're national chains and outlets that you all could research. The top 5 settlements amounted to over $250 million, and the cases never even went to trial. So as a dealer or a finance company, if you're using this in the collection process, you have to be vigilant with respect to compliance. And one of the main areas of compliance is proper opt-in, opt-out procedures with specific language and texting requirements. Bottom line is the FTC has said, if I'm a customer and I type back to you, stop. I don't want to hear your message anymore. Thank you, but I just want you to stop reaching me. Stop is not ambiguous, is their ruling. Stop means stop. You can't send them one more that says, oh, are you sure you want to stop our communication? You can't say, look, we'd like to keep you as a customer. You can't say, well, why? You simply have to stop. That's what the law dictates, and that's your safest position. This is one of the key areas dealers get into trouble. And it's also quite risky when you have your staff using their devices in terms of using that to communicate with customers, because there is no opt-in, opt-out management. So that is one of the key areas that you have to be vigilant on in terms of if you're going to use texting, whether it's on devices, on a web platform, anything, the TCPA applies to you, I assure you. So make sure that you understand it and that you're on a compliant solution. Now, let's talk a little bit about the penalties for, well, I don't think I'm going to get caught, or I'm not worried about that. So it's just by the nature of what we do. Dealers are already targets. In my 20 years as a dealer, trust me, I know that. Our business is fraught with TCPA risk. There's all kinds of cases that have happened where salesmen have contacted individual customers that they wanted to perhaps visit for a drink or take out to dinner. There's collection activity where someone said, stop pestering me about my loan, and an aggressive collector kept texting. So here's what happens. Each individual violation can result in a $1,500 per text sent penalty. So let's say that one of your collectors, and this is a live example from a client a few years ago who may be watching this video. Let's say that a collector sent 100 texts, and back 100 texts ago, I was the customer. I'm 60 days late on my loan. I'm running. I won't answer your calls. You can't repo my car. I'm playing the game, so to speak. That customer texted stop. Over 100 messages continued to be sent. Well, when you run the math out on this, that's $150,000 of exposure just for 100 texts to one customer. So rest assured, you can avoid this, but you can't play games with it, and there's no gray area, because when these lawsuits are lodged against you, there's almost always a smoking gun. And the smoking gun is your customer's there with their phone that says, look at all these texts I got. There's why I texted stop, and I got 100 texts after it. And it's done. It doesn't even go to discovery. There's no defense. You might as well just get the checkbook out, just hand it to them blank, and get ready to run. So I would ask you, if you're interested in SMS, if you're going to increase your SMS strategy and your communication with customers, make sure that you're compliant and make sure that you're within what the TCPA provides for. And it's not too hard to stay out of trouble. The cost of staying out of trouble is virtually nothing. The cost of getting in trouble, much like other things, is a big number. So I hope that helps you from a client's perspective. Now, for those of you that say, hey, I'm going to go back and ramp this up, I really want to, I hear you, Chris, we've been using some texting, but I'm going to take it to the next level. I want to give you some just guidance here on what a robust solution should look like. It should do really three main things for you. And this is by no means the complete list, but these are things you should think about. One, whatever platform you choose should be optimized for your specific business usage. So if you're going to use it in the auto business for the sales process or the collection process or service, it should be optimized to fit with what you do. This helps drive the client experience. Your employees are going to be more inclined to use it if it's friendly, and it's going to drive engagement with your customers. Again, the open rates speak volumes. I always offer this challenge when I'm doing these workshops on texting. Do a simple exercise. Send out 10 texts to 10 different customers and keep track of how many respond and how long it takes them to respond. And then pick another 10 prospects or customers and phone them and see how many you actually get through to, how many you have voicemail, and how many call you back. It'll make you, it'll convert you right away because almost always the texting ends up being a more efficient solution that has greater interaction with the clients. That's mainly due to that 98% open rate versus emails. So would you rather reach 98% of people on a messaging platform or 14%? And I'm not suggesting it replaces email. I think it complements it well and it enhances your message. The other thing a platform should do is centralize your communication. You don't want employees any longer using their personal devices. I think one of the questions we saw submitted here was, hey, I'm using texting. We think we're really good at it, but my employees use their devices. Is there anything wrong with this? And the answer to the question would be, it's a big issue. So if I was your employee, I'm using my device, and you either have to dismiss me or I quit, and I go to work at another dealership, would you give me access to your entire CRM that I worked with while I was with you? Would you let me take all of my customers packaged up nicely with an efficient way to communicate with them with me as I leave? The answer is certainly no. That's what essentially you're doing if you're in that scenario. Now, if you're the dealer principal or the owner and you're using your own device, I get it. You're going to be around. But in terms of any size operation, if you have employees using their own devices, I would strongly suggest you don't. I would have part of my electronic communication policy would be employees can't use their personal devices to communicate with my clients. We see more and more small, medium, and large firms going to this method of communication. We've worked with a large financial group that we know is actually ordering thousands and thousands of iPhones because they're going to replace, right now their employees are using their own devices, and it's a financial type industry where there's sensitive communication info, and they're actually acquiring a large block of phones so that the company can provide the device and you can only communicate on this device. Most platforms will allow you to do that, and that's why you want to bring that in-house. I'm not telling you go out and buy iPhones for all your employees or Androids for all your employees. I'm just saying you need to have a solution, and it should centralize your communication. One thing that this does for you if you're centralizing is you now have history and search functionality. I can now go back and look at my conversations. I can make sure that we are not going outside the bounds of what I want in terms of the sales process or the dialogue with customers or misrepresentations. If I ever get sued and somebody says, well, isn't this what you represented? I most likely will have a history that I can search and look and print out if my salesperson was communicating via text. So a good solution for you should have a detailed 5-year retention of all the conversations. And 5 years because that's actually the statute of limitations that applies under the TCPA. So I want to have my conversations for at least 5 years because somebody could make an allegation against me. Long-term retention of the communications is critical. It also allows you to see what's been effective and what's not effective. So this can be a real learning experience for you and your staff, because you can help use those instances as training to help new employees know how to harness this powerful communication method. And then finally, I want to reiterate it, be compliant. That's one of the solutions that any SMS or MMS platform should provide for you, is it must provide compliance insurance for you. And what that really entails is it should capture, store, and manage the complete customer consent process. So the whole opt-in, opt-out, proper consent given, proper consent retrieved. It should manage that automatically for you. When consent is removed, if I text stop, the platform should not allow you to text me because I've told you stop. Think about one of your employees' devices. If I text stop to it, there is nothing whatsoever to prevent them from sending another message to me. You are now in violation of the TCPA in that scenario. So a good solution should manage that process for you. If customers text stop, you don't want to reach out to them again. They can certainly, when they come in for service, hey, we noticed you texted stop back. I didn't mean to. I really do want to get your specials. They can re-opt in, but without that opt-in, you can't communicate with that customer via text. Again, remember the TCPA, try that Google search I mentioned to you, TCPA attorneys. You will find about 25 plaintiffs attorneys for every one defense attorney on the TCPA. You'll see some defense saying we can defend against TCPA acts if you're in harm's way. The bottom line is almost all of those cases settle. It's a very quick settlement. In our own backyard right here, our hockey team is in contention for the Stanley Cup. Hopefully, they're at the semifinals. They were a victim of a public $300 million settlement because they just texted people that didn't want to get texted. So $300 million is a lot to settle for. So I would urge you, just make sure TCPA compliance is a part of your overall strategy. And again, all of this is so that you stay out of trouble and you can avoid significant loss. If you ever do find yourself on the other side of a TCPA claim, is going to be most likely well into 5 figures, likely into 6 figures, and they'll try to develop a pattern that will ramp that text violation way up. So I would strongly suggest that part of your consideration is to make sure that you have a compliant solution for your SMS strategy. So I want to give a little bit of time here. I think we have time for a few questions. I want to thank you for your participation. I hope that this information has been informative to you. If you need any other info, there will be questions submitted as you folks watch this, and we're not live. We are committed. NIADA has asked us to make sure we respond to every question within 24 hours or a business day. We will gladly do that. So if you happen to text us a question or email us a question, we will make sure we try to get you an answer. So with that, I think we'll open it up for questions and answers if there are any.
Yeah, Chris, let's go ahead and answer a couple of questions that have come in.
Sure, sure.
One attendee asked, we do a fair amount of texting now, and my employees use their phones. Is there anything wrong with that?
Yeah, so that one the answer is absolutely yes. Now, the good news is you're using texting, so it sounds like you're getting the value of the communication. The bad news is you're exposed 2 ways. One, you're likely not complying with TCPA. You don't have any opt-in, opt-out consent going on. I'm sure your employees are trying to do their best job on the lot and in collections or whatever your situation is, making sure it's effective. But the bottom line is you're probably not in compliance with proper opt-in, opt-out management. So I would suggest that you look at a platform where the employees can still use their device, but you should get a device that has an app in the App Store if it's an iTunes product, or on the Android device. I would want an app on there where they still can communicate with their phone, so they're effective, after hours, so they're effective when they're sitting having dinner. But I would want that to flow through your platform. What happens typically is when they go away, if an employee leaves, you simply then shut their credentials off. They don't have your CRM info, and you still have retained all that communication with those customers. So very good question. I would just suggest you fine-tune your strategy and put a compliant solution in place.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so we've got another one here. Do I need every customer or prospect to sign a form, quote unquote, opting in so I can text them?
Another great question. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I've seen some press and some people say you must have it in writing, signed in person. It's actually not mandated. You can get that opt-in electronically. So there is very specific language that's provided for, and we can help you script that. But there's very specific language, and some of you have probably received this based on interaction you've had with different players in the market that you work with, where you can opt that person in electronically. They can reply with a Y, and now they've opted in. Now, your platform should maintain that opt-in because that's very critical. I now know that customer would like to receive information from me. I can now communicate with them until they send stop, at which time I must cease communication. So really good question, but you can obtain that opt-in electronically. It does not have to be a signed written form.
Okay. All righty. I've got another attendee asking, we use Google for texting in our dealership. Is that a good idea?
Well, Google is powerful for everything, right? I would tell you that I don't know all of your circumstance and what you're trying to accomplish in your dealership, but if you're using the Google kind of free texting platform, that again is problematic from a TCPA compliance standpoint. I would just ask you how you're managing that opt-in, opt-out, and is it clean? I haven't seen too many dealers that have that clean. I understand why to use it. It's free. Free is not always free when you get in trouble. Free can become very expensive. The other thing that a lot of dealers don't know, depending on your size, is there's, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but there's also something called throttle rates. And that's how many texts you can push out per minute or per hour. Quite often, those free platforms are throttled to 5 texts a minute. Now, if you don't need to go over 5 texts a minute, that's not a big deal in and of itself. TCPA issues still exist. But if you're using this to communicate with hundreds of customers in your service department, or if you're using it to communicate a lot for the sales process, what's going to happen is they have a throttle on the pipeline. So only so many texts can go out at a time. And that's what a lot of people aren't aware and say, hey, I texted you, but you didn't get it, Mr. Customer. Well, the reason is you're on a throttled platform and it just didn't go through yet. And sometimes they then purge and never go. So I would tell you to, if you're sold on texting, if you're sold on the idea that it can help your business, solutions are pretty inexpensive. So I would actually, if I want to do any kind of scale or significant volume of texting, volume being more than 1,000 a month, I would probably want a different solution than just the Google free platform.
Okay. All right. We've got time for one more. We have someone asking, do I need special software or equipment to use TextMaxx Pro?
No, very good question. No, most texting platforms, our platform, TextMaxx Pro, as many other platforms are, they're basically web delivered. They're service as a software. So basically that web platform, you would log in on the web, you can access it devices. There's no particular equipment that you need. So the answer is no. There's nothing required other than access to a device that is web enabled.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris, and to everyone in attendance today. That's all the time we have for questions today.